In their defining document, written in September of 2000, a full year, they acknowledged that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one. Absent, in their own chilling words, some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year later, that
Engineers
event
at the firm that built the building's best guess to account for the missing 1,200 feet of material from each tower is that large portions simply vaporized into the dust that rained down on New Yorkers immediately after the collapse.
'George W. Bush took office in 2000. He brought with him Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary and Deputy Secretary for Defense Paul Wolfowitz, all of whom the administrations of Ronald Reagan, W. Bush. Paul Wolfowitz, in particular, had long been recognized as the intellectual force behind a radical neoconservative fringe of the Republican Party. For years, Wolfowitz had been advancing the idea to consider its commitments to international treaties, international law, and multilateral organizations such as the United Nations. A radical plan for American military domination first surfaced during the administration of George H.W. Bush. Paul Wolfowitz, working in the Department of Defense, was asked to write the first draft of a new national security strategy, a document entitled the Defense Planning Guidance. The most controversial elements of what would later come to be known as the Wolfowitz Doctrine were that the United States should dramatically increase defense spending, that it should be willing to take preemptive military action, and that it should be willing to use military force unilaterally, with or without allies. This new reliance on military force was necessary, according to Wolfowitz, to prevent the emergence of any future or potential rivals to American power, and to secure access to vital resources, especially Persian Gulf oil. Out of power during the Clinton presidency, Wolfowitz dealt with a number of influential conservatives. In 2000, they would craft yet another proposed national security strategy, this one published by right-wing the Project for the New American Century. At its core, the document revived the Wolfowitz Doctrine. It called on the United States to increase the military budget by up to $100 billion, to deny other nations the use of outer space, and to adopt a more aggressive and unilateral foreign policy that would allow the United States to act offensively and preemptively in the world. The elimination of states like Iraq figured prominently in this grand vision. But even these hardline conservatives knew that the Wolfowitz Doctrine was likely too radical to win the support of the foreign policy establishment, their own Republican Party, and the American defining document, written in September of 2000, a full year before 9/11, they acknowledged that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one. Absent, in their own chilling words, some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year later, that event would arrive.
There's the American Enterprise Institute at the same location that PNAC is at. Dulles Airport Car Service, Avis Car Rental, Lake Research, Bretton Woods Committee. Justin B. Dean, that's what I want you to remember him. The defenders are wild. ABC News, and you got attention to all the damn broadcast equipment right there. See that there? Those are satellite transmitters and receivers. Everybody knows what those are. That's basic forensic photography at your best there. So you zoom back on out, and you just come over here, and you just imagine for a minute. Do you think that they run a cable down here, they run a cable down here, or do you think it would be impossible for anything that was being done here to be controlled from over here or over here? or over here. And whatever happened to the video footage of these locations? How many cameras are here? How long have they had camera systems? Well, I tell you what I know. These places right here are tapped into every closed circuit station. And of course they're not going to like me for saying that. Mr. Private Yahoo Company and ABC, you lying son of a bitches. Rupert Murdoch don't get out of the damn television business, we all gonna burn in hell. Your bullshit overbearing systems that are frying the damn planet. I can bitch at you, remember?
The point is, it seems to me, that there are methods at present available, methods superior in some respects to Hitler's method, which could be used in a bad situation. I mean, what I feel very strongly is that we mustn't be caught by surprise by our own advancing technology. This has happened again and again in history. Technology has advanced, and this changes social conditions, and suddenly people have found themselves in a situation which they didn't foresee and doing all sorts of things they didn't really want to do.
Well, now, what do you mean? Do you mean that we develop our television, but we don't know how to use it correctly? Is that the point that you're making?
Well, at present, the television, I think, is being used quite harmlessly. It's being used, I think, I would feel it's being used too much to distract everybody all the time. But, I mean, imagine, which must be the situation in all communist countries, where the television, where it exists, is always saying the same thing the whole time. It's always driving along. It's not creating a wide front of distraction. It's creating a one-pointed drumming in of a single idea all the time. It's obviously an immensely powerful instrument.
At any point during this day, were you just, in a very base way, afraid?
There were many times, Miles, that you were afraid, you were worried, especially when I was standing in front of the Pentagon that night, seeing one of our fortresses pried open by a missile airplane, thinking about the number of people that probably died on the plane.
On September 10th, 2001, you'll notice Donald Rumsfeld made a speech that the Pentagon had lost almost $3 trillion worth of unaccounted for expenses. Then you can see what happened in September 11th and notice that that story disappeared.
I was going to say terrifying.
There could be a large cover-up going on.
And I've mused over the fact that I've read some of these things and asked what they thought.
It was the major headlines on that morning of September 11th, where the day before Donald Rumsfeld made that speech, trillions of dollars gone.
Pentagon, the day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So.
He was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They've got to cover up the fact that they can't do the job.
The Pentagon's Inspector General partially substantiated several of Minnery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate the financial statements. 20 years ago, Pentagon employee Franklin C. Spinney made headlines exposing what he calls the accounting games. He's still there, and although he does not speak for the Pentagon, he believes the problem has gotten worse.
Those numbers are pie in the sky. The books are cooked routinely year after year after year.
Retired Vice Admiral Jack Shanahan commanded the Navy's Second Fleet the first time Donald Rumsfeld served as Defense Secretary.
With good financial oversight, we could find $48 billion in loose change in that building without having to hit the taxpayer.
In the 2.5 minutes since this report began, the Pentagon has spent nearly $2 million, and it may never know where 25% of those tax dollars went. In Los Angeles, I'm Vince Gonzalez for Eye on America.
Mr. Secretary, according to the Comptroller General of the United States, there are serious financial management problems at the Pentagon, to which Mr. Cooper alluded. Fiscal year 1999, $2.3 trillion missing. Fiscal year 2000, $1.1 trillion missing. And DOD is the #1 reason why the government can't balance its checkbook. The Pentagon has claimed year after year that the reason it can't account for the money is because its computers don't communicate with each other. My second question, Mr. Secretary, is who has the contracts today to make those systems communicate with each other? How long have they had those contracts? And how much have the taxpayers paid for them? Finally, Mr. Secretary, after the last hearing, I thought that my office was promised a written response to my question regarding the 4 war games on September 11th. I have not yet received that response, but would like for you to respond to the questions that I've put to you today, and then I do expect the written response to my previous question, hopefully by the end of the week.
Thank you, Representative. The second question, I've forgotten what the second question was.
I think Ms. Jonas knows it.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. I appreciate the question. I appreciate your interest in our department's financial condition, and we are working very hard on that program. I've just come back recently.
I understand that you're working hard on it, but my question was, who has the contract? How long have they had that contract, and how much money have we spent on it?
In general, we spend about $20 billion in the Department on Information Technology Systems. The accounting systems are part of that. I can get you the exact number for the record of what we spend on our current, what we call legacy systems, and those that we're moving toward.
And who has the contracts?
That would be a multitude of individuals.
Could you name some, please?
Well, I think off the top of my head, well, I would rather not. I'd rather provide that for the record.
That's not privileged information, is it?
I'm sure it's not.
Well, please. Yeah. And we still have time, so please.
I would be glad to provide for the record. I don't want to talk from the top of my head and be incorrect.
This is Tron Truth Seekers.
Well, if you can give me information to that effect.
I'm sure you are interested in all of the information that I have, and I'll be more than happy to provide it to you.
Good, thank you.
But I would also like to get information from you.
Okay.
For example, the information that I just requested about who has those contracts.
Certainly.
Let me assure the gentlelady that we'll make sure that this exchange of information takes place. And Mr. Secretary, if you can get back with us on the Dyne Corps story, we'll get that to the gentlelady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll get back on both of the first two questions, but the Congresswoman has raised the other question twice now, and I'd like to have General Myers respond because you mentioned it in the last hearing. And I think it would be helpful to get the answer, even though we're on red, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
General Myers, go right ahead.
But I would like to have the answer in writing as well, as I thought my office was promised.
Okay, I don't know about the promise, Congresswoman, but could you repeat the question to make sure I'm answering the right question? This is 9/11 question.
The question was, we had 4 war games going on September 11th, and the question that I tried to pose before the Secretary had to go to lunch was whether or not the activities of the 4 war games going on September 11th actually impaired our ability to respond to the attacks?
The answer to the question is no, did not impair our response. In fact, General Eberhart, who was then the commander of North American Aerospace Defense Command, as he testified in front of the 9/11 Commission, I believe he told them that it enhanced our ability to respond, given that NORAD didn't have the overall responsibility for responding to the attacks today. That was an FAA responsibility. But they were 2 CPXs. There was 1 Department of Justice exercise that didn't have anything to do with the other 3, and there was an actual operation ongoing because there was some Russian bomber activity up near Alaska. So
let me ask you this then. Who was in charge of managing those war games?
And General, why don't you give the best answer you can here in a short period of time, and we'll. The gentlelady wants to get a written answer anyway, and then we can move on to other folks.
The important thing to realize is North American Aerospace Defense Command was responsible. These are command post exercises. What that means is all the battle positions that are normally not filled are indeed filled. So it was an easy transition from an exercise into a real-world situation. It actually enhanced the response. Otherwise, it would take somewhere between 30 minutes and a couple of hours to fill those positions, those battle spaces, with the right staff officers.
Mr. Chairman, begging your indulgence, was September 11th declared a National Security Special Event Day?
I'd have to look back. I do not know. You mean after the fact or before the
No, because of the activities going on that had been scheduled at the United Nations that day.
I'd have to go back and check. Don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. I thank the gentlelady. The chair would ask that
there are known knowns. There are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we now know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we do not know we don't know.
It takes incredible conspiracies. Hundreds of people would have had to be involved. People would have had to be rubbed out without a trace. People would have had to blow up buildings without any evidence. You know, don't you see this as a bit paranoid?
Okay, Donald, did you ever find that $2.3 trillion that you talked about the day before 9/11? Did you ever find it?
It was always there, and what the problem was tracking it through the system. So when I arrived in the Pentagon and they told me that they can't track $2.3 billion that had been accumulated over the period before I got there, it turns out that there was not a legal problem or a loss. It was a matter of the complexity of the systems and tracking it all the way through.
That's the major headlines on that morning of September 11th. The day before, Donald Rumsfeld made that speech. Trillions of dollars gone. And you can look up why we might think that there could be some illegitimacy to that situation.
The scene here is San Francisco just arrived from Baltimore through the Panama, bringing in its cargo the 6 reels of submarine telephone transferred to a waiting barge. The end of the long journey from the eastern resting place of these cable circuits is to be the floor of San Francisco. These are the actual circuits that were planned to serve the artificial island that was made to rise as a home for the Golden Gate International. And after serving this appealing panorama of these same circuits will be part of a great new cable artery. This artery will join the others already winding beneath the surface of the bay to bring the voice of America to this busy
Pentagon, the day before Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon
wasted
bureaucracy.
By the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
But the next day And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
Calls for more than $48 billion
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
Well, we don't know what they spend it on.
A Marine turned whistleblower is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
He says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing
He
a
was
good
reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They've got to cover up the fact that
Pentagon's
they can't
Inspector
do
General partially substantiated several of Minnery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate the financial statements. 20 years ago, Pentagon employee Franklin C. Spinney made headline counting games. He's still there, and although he does not speak for the Pentagon, he believes the problem has gotten
pie in the
worse.
sky. The books are cooked routinely year after year.
Jack Shanahan commanded the Navy's Second Fleet, served as defense secretary.
Financial oversight. We could find $48 billion in loose change in that building without
In the
having
2.5 minutes since this report began, the Pentagon has spent nearly $2 million, and it may never know where 25% of those tax dollars went. In Los Angeles, I'm Vince Gonzalez for Eye on